Bismillah, in the next section here of the first chapter about purification, Imam al-Buhuti rahimahullah ta'ala, he says, الثالث نجس وهو ما تغير بنجس ويسير لاقى نجاسة لا بمحل تطهير ويطهر بإضافة كثير والكثير بزوال تغيره بنفسه وبنزح بقي بعده كثير فإن بلغ الماء قلتين وهما 400 رطل و46 و3 أسباع رطل مصري لم ينجس إلا بالتغير وإن شك في تنجس ماء أو غيره بنى على اليقين وإن اشتبهه طهور بنجس لم يتحرى ويتيمم لعدم غيرهما وإن اشتبهه بطاهر توضأ وضوءا واحدا من كل غرفة وإن اشتبهت ثياب طاهرة بنجسة صلى في كل ثوب بعدد النجسة وزاد صلاة وكذا أمكنة ضيقة ويصلي في واسعة بلا تحر. So here in this next section, after we've talked about tahur, water, and we've talked about tahir, water, we're obviously going to move on to the third category of water, which is none other than najis. And so the third is najis, or najs with a kasra on the jim, or najs with a sukoon on the jim, either one, which is what is changed in a major or minor way. Remember, we're talking about taste, color, and smell, either major or minor, due to impurity, be it a small or large amount of water, and a meager amount of water which has contacted impurity, but not on the side of purification. So here there's a couple of things to note. Basically, when we're dealing with a small amount or meager amount of water and a large amount of water. So the small amount of water, it doesn't matter if any changes have occurred. Mere contact with najis or najasa will make the water najis. Simple contact, a drop, for example, of najasa into a small amount of water will change the water to be najis. The large amount of water, any type of change that occurs, says whether it is a change in a major or minor way. So if any type of change due to najasa has occurred in a large amount of water, then that water is najis. It says if a soil object is introduced into a water as opposed to the water being poured over it, the meager amount will become impure regardless of any changes, and the large amount will become impure if any of its qualities change. So this is important because the method in which we typically wash clothes is in a machine. Now, if you're washing clothes to remove najasa, the machine can be problematic because you have to wash it at least 7 times, according to the madhab. And most standard washing machines wash the clothes or run a cycle 2 to 3 times only. Within a single cycle, there are 2 to 3 different washings where water is introduced. Like there is the washing, and then the water is drained, and then there is the rinse cycle, and then the water is drained, and there could be a follow-up softener cycle depending on your machine. That may be rare. But you're not going to get in one washing cycle in this machine a total of 7 washings. It might not be economical to do that. It could be wasteful to do that. And so typically what I advise people do in this case is to use the laundry sink or to wash the clothes outside of the laundry, the washing machine, to remove the najasa, go through the ritual act of washing it 7 times or 8 at least to get that cleansed, and then throw it in the washing machine, if you have to do the laundry or just for like a general cleaning. I wouldn't advise using the laundry machine, the washing machine, to remove najasa. However, theoretically, introducing water to a soiled object, which means the soiled object is there. Let's imagine we're using the washing machine. We put the soiled object in the washing machine first, and then we pour the water on top of that. The water, even, whatever happens to it, he says here, if the soiled object is introduced into a water as opposed to the water being poured over it, the meager amount will become impure. So here, basically, if we're going in order of what the Imam is saying, Imam Ibn Qaid, basically, if we filled our laundry machine, our washing machine with water, and then we put the soiled article into the water, okay, the meager amount of water, which is the washing machine is always going to hold only a small amount of water. A small amount of water. Washing machines, at least not the standard at home domestic water machine or washing machine, is not going to have the amount of water that is needed to be considered a major amount of water. Right? That's like 50 gallons. Our washing machines aren't holding 50 gallons. Maybe a commercial washer might. So anyway, the point is the meager amount will become impure regardless of any changes. So you have the water. The moment you take that soiled garment and put it into the basin that has the water in it, it's come in contact with najasa, and therefore the water is najis. And if it's a large amount of water, if any type of change occurs, having introduced it into the water is najis. No change, water is still good. This is opposite to the first scenario I was trying to describe, which meant that you put the object in the basin and then you pour the water on top of it. The water on top of it is not going to change from being tahur to being najis until the water is removed. So remember, it's got to do its purifying act. It has to purify. So while it's on there purifying it, you understand the difference between pouring the water on versus putting the soiled object into the water. There is a difference. And so theoretically, the washing machine could work. The only problem is having to meet the minimum requirement of washings according to the madhab. He says, a large or meager amount of impure water, is purified in 3 ways. Okay, so how are we going to clean this impure water? Number 1, by adding an abundant amount. A large or meager amount is purified by adding an abundant amount, meaning adding a large amount of water, which is qullatan or more. Qullatan, that's the term you need to know. Qulla is 1, qullatan is 2, or qullatain is 2. Or more to a large or small amount of water until any changes caused by the impurity have dissipated. They've disappeared. The second manner is its natural disappearance within an abundant amount, like the process of wine into vinegar in the natural acidification process, meaning there's been no human intervention to change wine to vinegar by adding something or by placing it somewhere. But if wine is just left in an abundant amount and then goes through the natural acidification process and becomes vinegar, the vinegar is pure. The vinegar is tahir and is now permissible to consume. If, for example, the wine is manipulated, there's human intervention in order to turn it into vinegar, then technically, according to the madhab, the vinegar is still impure. The najasa of it has not been removed. It has to be naturally occurring process. Or its, i.e. the impurity's impact on the water, removal after which an abundant amount remains. It is removed after an abundant amount remains. But if too much is removed, reducing the amount of water to less than qullatayn, so basically like, if the abundant amount of water If an abundant amount of water has some area in which it's obviously impure, those qualities have changed, it's localized. You know, like you're looking at a pond and there's like some impurity in there, and that's been localized, the color, the taste, the change of smell only in a portion of the water, you can remove that water. You can remove that impurity and you can remove that water so that the changes are no longer present, so long as the removal of that water does not detract from the entire body to the point that it becomes less than a large amount, meaning qullatayn. So he says here, removed, but if too much is removed, reducing the amount of water to less than qullatayn, and the change is still present, it can no longer be purified in this manner, meaning you can't keep removing water. You've reduced it to qullatayn, and now that the presence of the najasa is there, simply by being present, all of the water is najis. So it's no longer localized, basically. You can't consider it localized in this scenario. Instead, in this case, if you remove too much water to reduce it to now being a small amount of water, now the only thing to do to purify that small amount of water is to add an abundant amount of pure water. Okay, so there's a couple of scenarios and things that you have to consider. If that's unclear, just scroll back and rewind and watch that again and really think, read the text. It's important, read the text and kind of grasp this concept between, a large amount of water, a small amount of water. Having the basics very clear in your mind will help you understand the particular issue. If the pure water reaches the amount of 2 qullas, now we're talking about this amount. What's the amount of a large amount versus a small amount? Equivalent to 446 and 4/7 Egyptian pounds or more, it will not become impure. This is not talking about like pounds in terms of currency. It's talking about like a measure, okay? He says, or more, it will not become impure due to mere contact, even if human urine or excrement were introduced, except due to change. So now in modern day standards measurements, what are we talking about exactly? This is like 50 US gallons, basically. This amount of water. So it's like one of those large barrels. That is the minimum to be considered a large amount. And then beyond that. It will not change a state from being pure or purifying to impure unless there's a change in color, taste, or smell, even if it's human urine or excrement. So imagine like, you got a pond and just a single drop of urine is introduced to that water, or somebody urinates, or multiple people urinate in that pond. So long as there's no change that have occurred, then the water has not changed states. This is based on a hadith narrated by the 5. Again, we've talked about that in the past, in which the Prophet ﷺ was asked about water in the wilderness, which is visited by both predator and prey. Why predator? What's the difference here? Predator and prey. So predatory animal is one that consumes other animals, which are considered najis. And then prey is obviously the animals that are consumed, the animals that we can also eat, which are considered tahir. So it's visited by animals which are considered impure najis. And what do? They go there and they put their faces, their mouths into the water, which means their saliva gets into the water, and they drink the water, etc. So they're asking him about this type of water because they're worried about, look, this impure animal is now interacting with the water. And so he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, said, if the water reaches qullatayn, nothing can spoil it. Okay? And what he, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he basically here said, and this is, we're looking at evidence in the usage and employment of hadith. There is al-mantuq, which is what was said, and then there's al-mafhum, which can be understood. So what he said indicates that such an amount can withstand contact with impurity. Basically, like that amount, that large amount, can withstand the contact with impurity, right? So long as there's no changes to it. It's just simply coming in contact with it does not change its state. And what's understood, al-mafhum, is that this amount or more is what defines a large quantity. And if the water is less than that, it will become impure by mere contact of impurity, such as impure beasts drinking from it, impure animals. So right, there's al-mantuq, what was said, and then there's al-mafhum, what is implied or what is understood. So from this one hadith, we can understand all of that. The definition of a large amount of water and the understanding of a large amount of water having to have been changed. And if it's not changed, it's pure. And if it's a small amount of water simply by contact, then it will become impure. You get all of that from this hadith, and that's just an example of how evidence is used. So the reason why I'm mentioning this at this level of our study is so that you can better understand, like, look, reading a hadith, it's just not simply reading it and on face value coming to some conclusion. There are multiple aspects and angles that you have to look at when it comes to this raw data. I would consider like the Quran, the ayat, and the hadith. They're like raw data. And to process that, you have to have these frameworks in place in order to really understand and properly utilize this information. Okay, so, and that's the job of the scholars and the fuqaha, is they have these tools and these frameworks, and they know how to employ such evidence in the correct manner. Something that requires a great deal of study and mastery. It's not something for the novice. You're not going to pick up Sahih Bukhari or a Muslim or the Musnad Imam Ahmad or a Sunnah Tirmidhi or Sunnah Abi Dawood or Ibn Majah or Nasa'i or any other books of hadith. You're not going to pick up the Quran as a novice or a beginner, even an intermediate student of knowledge, maybe not even an advanced student of knowledge, and pick up these sources. Just read it and say, hey, look, you know what this means? This means X, Y, and Z. The ruling of this is X, Y, and Z. No, you're not going to do that. All right, that's a disservice, and it's injustice. It's probably going to be wrong, and in the event that it is right, it's probably still sinful for doing that without being fully prepared and being worthy of doing so. Anyway, we go on. He says, if one doubts in the impurity of water. So we've talked about najis. We're done with that category. So we've talked about tahur, tahir, and najis. Now we're talking about if you doubt in these things. He says, if one doubts in the impurity of water, etc., such as a garment, right? This was the etc. Garment or another pure object. Is it pure? Is it impure? They are to act upon certainty. What are you sure of? What are you absolutely certain of? Well, you know the water is pure. Could it have been changed? What are we going to do? Okay. The principle here is that certainty is not removed with doubt. And so if one is certain the water is clean, doubt does not hinder its usage. And asking about that which one is uncertain regarding its impurity is disliked. You don't have to inquire. He says, asking about that which one is uncertain regarding its impurity is disliked. You don't need to go asking. But if you are aware that it is in fact impure, then you are obliged to inform someone who wishes to use or to consume it. If you know that the water is spoiled and you see somebody getting ready to use it, then you got to say, hey, look, the water's najis. Don't use that. It's been spoiled. But if you are approaching a body of water or a vessel of water and it looks fine, you're uncertain as to whether it's pure or impure, you're going to look at it on face value, it looks good. You're not going to go inquiring. You're not certain. You're not going to inquire. Hey, does anyone know about this water? No, you don't. That's considered makruh. The next part he goes on and says, if purifying water appears indistinguishable from impure water, meaning a tahur becomes indistinguishable from impure najis, and it is not possible to purify it by adding a large amount to it in a single container. All right, so this would be an obligation if they appear indistinguishable, meaning you know one is najis and you know one is pure. You just don't know which one is which. You're in trouble now because you have to make wudu. And in order to make a true valid wudu, you have to be certain about the water type. You have to be sure that it is pure. In this case, you can't be like using water that you're sure that it couldn't be or could not be. Okay? There's a certainty here. You know one is pure and you know one is impure. So you have to make wudu with the one you know is pure. Not like the issue of doubt. We're going to remove doubt based on certainty. Here, this is a different issue. I know one is pure. I know one is impure. It's not, I'm uncertain that this is pure. Here is two waters, you know, one is pure, one is impure, but you're unable to determine one from the other. And in this case, what you would do is you would purify them by adding them together if they met the conditions to do so. But if you're unable to do that, by pouring them into a single container, which would basically dilute one or the other enough to where the impurity or that quality of najasa would be removed, a determination based on assumption is not to be made. You're not going to guess. Okay, you're not going to go, okay, Bismillah, go with the right. You're not going to, or it's possible, you're not going to sit there and try and work out some type of assumption and just go with that one. Rather, tayammum is performed due to the absence of other water. Tayammum will be made in this case. Remember, tahur and najis in that case. If it, purifying water, tahur, appears indistinguishable from pure water, and it is not possible to purify the potentially pure water, not the purifying water, if you can't purify the tahir water, again, by adding them together, which would be an obligation if you could, if this appears indistinguishable from pure water, and it's not possible to purify the potentially pure water, one full wudu, by taking enough from each body of water to fully cover the respective body parts during each step of the process with a definitive intention from both bodies of water until a complete purification is made. You have to then make, so basically the scenario is, it says in order to complete the entire process with the required level of certainty. Okay, check this out. So now the scenario is you have a vessel or a body of water which you know is pure, it's tahur, and then one you know is tahir. You're not able to determine which one is which. What do? You can't mix them together for whatever reason so that it would become certainly tahur. So what you have to do is you make wudu. You're going to make one wudu. Okay? One wudu in its entirety. But while making wudu, you're going to use both of these waters. Okay? And how you're going to do that is you're going to make an intention that you're using tahur water with both of them. Your intention is not going to be, I'm uncertain about the tahuriyatul ma, if it's tahur or not, and I'm just using two. No, it's I am certain that I'm using tahur water while I take water from here, rinse my mouth, take water from here, rinse my mouth, take water from here and wash my face, take water from here, wash my face, take water from here, wash my feet, take water from here, wash my feet or my face. Of course, obviously following the correct order of wudu, but you understand the point is you're going to take water from here and wash a limb, take water from here and wash the same limb, and you're going to go in order so that you're making one wudu. You're not going to make wudu with this water and then make wudu with that water as two separate acts of wudu, because in either of those scenarios, you're not certain you're using the tahur water. At the end of it, you'll know I used tahur water in one of them, but in wudu, you're required here to know that you're using tahur water. And so by using both waters in the same wudu process, the same single process, you can be absolutely certain that each limb was washed with tahur water to complete an entire single wudu. Okay? These rules apply, these rules also apply for ghusl and the removal of najasa, with the exception that the process can be done completely from one body of water followed by the next, due to the entire body serving as a single organ in the ghusl. Basically, you don't have to worry about tartib, etc. in the ghusl. And the lack of requirement for an intention in the removal of najasa, which basically means like in those scenarios, you can take an entire ghusl, right? You have the intention, you make ghusl with one body of water, and then you make ghusl with the other body of water. You don't have to go bit by bit, part by part of the process for ghusl, because basically like it's one thing. It's not like wudu, there's parts that have to go in order. Wholesale is different than that, which you should know in general and will be discussed in detail later. And the same thing goes for the removal of najasa. It says, if a single pure garment or more appears indistinguishable from a single soiled garment, so now it's a similar scenario. Now we're talking about garments, though, not water, or more. So you have more than one garment or more than two garments which are soiled with najasa and not merely dirty. So it has to be actual najasa, and a garment which is clearly pure is unavailable, right? So there's a single pure garment, and then you have one or multiple impure garments. You don't have like another pure garment available that you know of. Prayer is made and repeated in each garment for as many prayers as there are soiled garments plus an additional prayer. Example of this, if there are 5 soiled garments, you have 6 thobes altogether. Let's say, like, because I'm wearing a thobe, I have 6 thobes altogether. 5 of them I know have najasa on them. 1 of them I know is still pure. I don't know which one is which. They're indistinguishable. I don't see anything. You understand? I can't detect the najasa, but I know it's happened. So what do I have to do? I'm going to pray 6 times because I have 6 total garments, 5 are najis. So you pray the amount of soiled garments plus 1, basically plus in that pure garment. While I've done that, of course, each prayer is in a different garment. All right, that's important. 5 are likely made in the soiled garments, and then 1 is made in a pure garment. The requisite intention, obviously, is made for each of the prayers. The same intention. You're praying, for example, dhuhr. I'm praying dhuhr ada'an. I'm just praying dhuhr regularly, but I'm going to do it 6 times so that I'm certain that I prayed in a pure garment. I've covered my awrah in a pure garment, which is an important part of the prayer. You can't have najasa on the body in prayer. Now, the difference between using the soiled garments and the water is that water adheres to the body and will soil it with impurity. That's why you can't, when you have pure water and impure water, you can't do what we did with pure water and tahir water, where you're using a little bit from each one. Because when you put that water on the body, it's soiling the body and has to be washed, right? That's impure water. It gets on the body, it's come in contact, now it has to be washed and removed, and we have to go through that whole process. Not possible when you're doing this. And that's the difference between using a soiled garment versus using soiled water. Soiled garments you can use because they don't adhere to the body, right? They're not adhering to the body, which would require the body now to be cleansed. It's the garment that has to be cleansed, not the body, as opposed to the soiled, the impure water, which would now need to be washed and removed. The soiled garment, because it says this is impermissible, whereas it is permissible to pray in a soiled garment when there is nothing else available. Right? So when there's nothing else available except for najis water, you have to make tayammum. But when there's nothing else available to wear, then you can wear this garment that has najasa on it in order to cover the awrah. The difference between the garments and determining the direction of the qibla, here's a different issue, right? Because in the prayer, you also have to face the qibla. But you may not know where the qibla is. So what do? Do you just make one prayer in every single direction so that you know that you've gotten one prayer facing the qibla? No, this is very different because the number of garments is going to be limited. Wal hukm al-ghalib, right? I mean, it's preponderant that you're not going to have like 100 garments. Not that that's an impossibility. That someone has 100 garments, 99 of them are soiled, and 1 of them's pure. That's just not typical. What's typical is it's a modest amount of clothing that have been soiled with 1 that is pure. However, the qibla, because there are simply too many possibilities in direction, it just becomes too difficult. Then in this case, you don't have to go through that process of trying to pray a prayer in each direction, but what you do is you simply do your best in determining the direction of the qibla, you pray, and khalas, you're done with it. And the same applies to narrow spaces, meaning this inability to distinguish between if something's been soiled or not. The same applies to narrow spaces. And so if one cannot leave a room that they're stuck in, like if they're imprisoned or they're held or they're a captive or they just can't go outside for whatever reason, and you know that one area of the room has been soiled, but you don't remember which one of those areas, then basically you have to pray the amount of soiled areas plus 1. So if there's one soiled area, you're going to pray twice. You're going to pray in one area, and then you're going to move and pray in another area. So you'll know that, look, at least I prayed in a pure area. Or if it's if there's 2 areas of the room that have been soiled and you don't know which ones are which, and the room has 3 areas, then you're going to pray 3 times. You're going to have ended up praying twice in once in impure areas. That's 2 prayers. And then the 3rd prayer will have been in a pure area. And then he goes on and he says, of course, this goes the same thing if there's 3 areas or 4 areas, etc. Though prayer in vast spaces is made once and without inquiry, because it is simply too difficult to repeat the prayer in every possible area, similar to the Qibla. So like you're out in this very vast open space, you know that some space has been soiled, but you're not going to go, and you don't know which one it is. You're not going to, or multiple spaces, you're not going to be doing this multiple prayers because the possibilities are just too many, and it becomes too difficult. And in Islam, our law seeks to make things easy and not difficult. And so because of that difficulty, you're not required to do so. And that wraps up this particular section.